Big battle off of turn 4 here. And into the wall goes Bubba Wallace.
Revenge is very common in NASCAR. Almost all drivers are guilty of it. Some do it well, while others execute it terribly. In one of the most recent races, we saw the latter part as Bubba Wallace would get revenge on Kyle Larson after he ran him up the racetrack in turn 4. What made the incident so bad was that Bubba Wallace would immediately junk his car, turn Larson into the outside wall, collect Christopher Bell, a manufacturer teammate, shove Larson after the incident, shove an official, and have one of the cringiest interviews in the 2022 season. Moments like this seem few and far between, but when they do happen, they are remembered for many years. And today, we are going to look at some of the worst revenge moments in NASCAR history. Now, to determine which incidents are going to be the worst, we are going to be looking at a few key features. 1. Was it an obvious act of revenge? 2. Did it inevitably end the Revengers race at that point? And 3. Were there further consequences involving the incident? We'll start from the more failed attempts of getting revenge and make our way up to some of the most infamous moments in NASCAR history. Let's take a look at some of the worst revenge moments in the history of NASCAR. Number 10, Danica Patrick's revenge against Landon Cassill in 2012. Danica Patrick's time in the NASCAR Cup Series was, I guess you could say, suspect at best. With multiple mediocre seasons and having a total of 7 top 10s in a span of 5.5 seasons, people were very disappointed in her performance. However, many fans should have immediately known that this was going to be a rough one after a failed attempt at revenge against Landon Cassill. Cassill was driving for a team known as BK Racing, a below-average team with a slimy owner that would eventually have his whole team liquidated to pay back all the money that he owed. During a 2012 race at Kansas, these two drivers were racing against each other throughout the entire race. Out of turn number 4, Cassill would get into her quarter panel, causing her to get loose on the straightaway. Danica would not appreciate this and felt like revenge was needed at the moment. What would happen next would be the most empty-headed attempt at taking out another driver.
Ooh, trouble, turn 1. Danica Patrick, Landon Cassill tangled up. Cassill going for a slide.
Yeah, we did not hit anything.
Complaining about Landon throughout the race, and when this happened, Greg Zipadelli, her crew chief, came on the radio and said, "You know better than to do that." So obviously he saw her at fault there.
Landon Cassill would come out of the incident with hardly any damage and would finish 18th, while Danica would not finish the race in 32nd and would show everyone in the sport that she was not ready to make it into the Cup Series. However, that would not stop Stewart-Haas Racing, who decided to move forward with her to run full-time in the Cup Series in 2012. She would only collect a handful of top 10s in her career, with a best finish in the point standings being 24th. Number 9, Jamie McMurray's revenge against Brian Vickers in 2011. Brian Vickers, you are an interesting fella. This driver seemed to be guaranteed to get a Team 1 victory during his stint with the team. However, he never seemed to do anything else. During the final races of the 2011 season, he was doing everything he could to grab the attention of other team owners as Red Bull Racing was looking to shut down at the end of the season. Well, he was able to grab the attention of others, but not the way he wanted to. See, at Martinsville, Brian Vickers seemed to have lost his mind as he took out more drivers than Ricky Stenhouse Jr. at a Daytona race. Many drivers were upset with him, but none more than Jamie McMurray, who was blatantly took out for no reason. McMurray's car was toast, however, that was not going to stop him from taking some revenge on Brian Vickers.
Laying on the racetrack, and then when Vickers comes by, McMurray, well, I know baseball season just ended, but we'll call that a swing and a miss.
For sure.
Well,
you didn't really miss.
All right, how about a foul ball then? Yeah.
What do you call it, Dale? A change-up? Yeah, he was expecting.
McMurray would lose his battery while waiting for the number 83 car, and would ultimately fail at getting his revenge, thus resulting in McMurray making it into the ESPN Not Top 10, something that NASCAR drivers usually avoid. Unfortunately for the 2010 Daytona 500 winner, too many fans saw it and gave him the publicity that he didn't want. Number 8, Jimmy Johnson's revenge against Kurt Busch in 2011. Jimmy Johnson was never really a driver that would cause that much controversy with his fellow competitors, and when he did, he was mostly on the receiving end. It would take a lot before you would see Jimmy Johnson be vengeful on the racetrack. However, there was one driver that seemed to really get underneath Jimmy Johnson's skin. Kurt Busch could have been viewed as the exact opposite from the number 48 machine. He seemed to be causing problems with everyone in the sport. The one driver he seemed to be the most upset with in 2011 was the future 7-time champion. During the fall race at Richmond, it seemed everything went to the boiling point when Kurt Busch decided to spin Jimmie Johnson on lap number 186. Jimmie Johnson would have a moderately damaged car at this point, but he could still continue throughout the race. However, he was not focused on getting the best finish that he could. He was just focused on paying back the 2004 champion. Jimmie Johnson would get the worst end of it, as his car would receive more damage than Kurt Busch in the incident. There would be really no penalties after this incident, however both drivers would receive some negative repercussions after the accident. Jimmie Johnson would not be a factor for the championship for the first time since 2005, while Kurt Busch would lose his ride in the 22 altogether, forcing him to move on over to some small team equipment for the next couple of years. Now I'm not gonna lie, these first few incidents that we've talked about, mostly the driver who was trying to get revenge got the worst end of it. However, from here on out, that is not going to be the case. Number 7, Carl Edwards' revenge against Brad Keselowski in 2010. A rivalry that lasted for a few years, Carl Edwards and Brad Keselowski's feud was one of the ugliest rivalries in the early 2010s. Both drivers would have multiple problems in the Xfinity Series, as well as the Cup Series, as Brad Keselowski would get his first win at the expense of Carl Edwards flying into the straightaway fence. Both drivers were clearly not fans of each other, and many wondered what would be the tipping point for both drivers. It's the 2010 season, and Brad Keselowski has started his Cup Series career with Team Penske, a move that would lead to Keselowski winning a championship a couple years down the road. At first, the new partnership is not going that great, as many of Keselowski's finishes have been mediocre at best. Luckily, it seems like Atlanta could potentially be a good race for the 12 team. The only problem would be that he would cause early problems with an old foe. Edwards would receive major damage in the incident, inevitably ending his day early. However, Carl Edwards and the team were not quite done and wanted to finish the race. Near the end of the race, Brad Keselowski is having a stellar race inside the top 10. All he has to do now is get around a bit of lap traffic and finish the last few laps. There's one problem. One of those cars was involved in an earlier incident, and they're looking right now to pay something back.
Trouble on the front stretch. A car has slammed the wall at just going into turn number 1. And that is the machine of Brad Keselowski. And that car got up on its roof, all right, and that was a hard crash there.
The accident would send Keselowski into the outside wall and fence, ending his day similar to what Carl Edwards endured a year prior. Brad Keselowski would escape the incident without any injuries, while Carl Edwards would be parked for the rest of the race and brought into the NASCAR hauler afterwards. He would be put on probation by NASCAR for the next 3 races, a punishment that did not feel like it fit the crime. However, the president of NASCAR at the time believed that the message was sent, and that Edwards got the point to never intentionally wreck Brad Keselowski again.
This is going to be down to the wire. Oh, touch. He spun out. Carl gets into Keselowski. Carl will win.
Good job.
Number 6, Kyle Busch's revenge against Kevin Harvick in 2011. The Candyman seemed to be at his worst behavior in the 2011 season. Kyle Busch was causing trouble with everyone he made contact with. It seemed like it would be only a matter of time before he pushed the wrong driver. Case in point, Kevin Harvick, a driver who would never take crap from any other driver that wronged him on the racetrack. It's the spring 2011 race at Darlington, and tempers are at their absolute limit with only a handful of laps to go. Kevin Harvick and Kyle Busch would make contact in turns 3 and 4, something that would irate Kyle Busch. Suddenly, Clint Bowyer would spin down the front straightaway, a chance for everyone to catch their breath. Unfortunately for Harvick, Kyle Busch was not ready to cool off.
Behind him, and Bowyer takes a wild ride into the safer barrier, and Kyle Busch turned Harvick around after they had made contact half a lap before.
Both drivers would be able to finish on the lead lap, but obviously neither were happy with the end result. After the race, Harvick would stop his car in order to have a talk with the driver of the 18 machine. He thinks about it for a moment, potentially waiting for his team, and decides to take off the gloves and jump out of his race car. Unfortunately for him, Kyle Busch doesn't feel like talking.
I'm going back here and we're going to have a little talk. And there goes his car.
That car just took off.
In the end, Kyle Busch was able to get his revenge, but unfortunately for Harvick, he was not able to. NASCAR would have them both come into the NASCAR hauler after the race. However, it didn't seem like no warnings or punishments were delivered after the event. Because of this bout would continue all throughout the season and lead to one of the worst bits of revenge that we will talk about later. Number 5. Robbie Gordon's revenge against Marcus Ambrose in 2007. Revenge for the most part is done between two drivers. However, in this case, NASCAR was quite helpful in making this situation happen. In the final laps at the Circuit Gilles Villeneuve, a strong battle is shaping out between two talented road course racers in the sport, Marcus Ambrose and Robbie Gordon. Many fans at this point know Robbie Gordon. He has been in the Cup Series for a few years at this point and has made two things clear. 1. He is very talented when it comes to road course racing, and 2. He is one of the most chaotic drivers in the sport. Basically, if you make the wrong move around Robbie Gordon, he will not think twice of taking you out. Marcus Ambrose, on the other hand, is fairly new to the NASCAR racing world. He is only in his first season in the Xfinity Series and is looking to prove to everyone that road racing is where he strives the most. He could have a similar temper like Robbie Gordon, however fans at this point are unfamiliar about his racing style. Both drivers have been bumping and banging for the lead in the closing laps when the caution comes out for an accident behind the drivers. Gordon realized that if he stays a little more aggressive on the rookie, then perhaps Ambrose will forfeit his lead to the veteran. However, Robbie Gordon is about to learn quickly that Ambrose does not let others push him around on the racetrack.
Up front, Robbie Gordon by Ambrose, who goes back on him. Caution flags waving.
Well, I wonder what the loops are with this thing. Boy, we didn't see the pass, but it looks like the back of Ambrose's car, the right rear corner, is all tore up. So obviously, he might have repaid the favor.
Robbie Gordon was spun by Marcus Ambrose at the beginning of the caution. He is less than pleased after being spun, but at least he'll be able to start up front, since he was the leader when the caution was thrown, right? Well, not quite. NASCAR decides to make the call that since Robbie didn't maintain speed due to being turned around by Ambrose, that he will start in the 13th position. Well, there's a problem with that, because Robbie Gordon is refusing to go back into the 13th position, instead staying in the second spot. After multiple laps of NASCAR black flagging Robbie Gordon in order to get back into his starting position, NASCAR decides to give up on officiating and throws the green flag, hoping that revenge doesn't happen in the closing laps. What would happen next is what everyone knew would happen.
There it is. Couldn't see that coming, could you?
Robbie Gordon would spin out Ambrose, ride off into the sunset, and do burnouts on the front straightaway next to the real winner of the race, Kevin Harvick. Fans, teams, and officials were baffled by the situation. He would be suspended from the following Cup race at Pocono and would never come close to winning an Xfinity Series race again. Number 4. Joey Logano's revenge against Denny Hamlin in 2013. The start of the 2013 season was met with a lot of question marks as NASCAR introduced the Gen 6 to the NASCAR Cup Series. The car did look nicer than its predecessor, however the performance was in question. Because of all these questions, many fans were wondering which drivers would be able to conquer the next-gen machine. One would be Joey Logano, a driver who at this point has only collected 2 victories in the last 4 seasons. He has signed on with Team Penske in their number 22 car, a car that has been riddled with bad luck, however he is hoping to turn that luck around. The first couple of races haven't been the most ideal, however it looks like Bristol is starting to head in the right direction for the team. That is until he makes contact with Denny Hamlin, causing him to finish 17th. Logano is clearly not happy with Denny Hamlin as he lets him know after the race that he will be coming for him. Denny Hamlin doesn't take the threat too seriously and focuses on the next race coming up, which is Fontana. Ironically, the 2 strongest drivers at the end of the race are the same 2 who were bickering with each other at the end of the Bristol race. Both have a great chance to wind up in victory lane. Joey Logano has the slight edge, but Denny Hamlin has the preferred line going into the final lap. Logano remembers back to last week and how Denny Hamlin raced him. Hamlin might have forgotten what Joey Logano said to him after the race at this point. However, Logano is about to make sure that he never forgets.
His car, Kyle Busch, he's looking.
Hamlin edges ahead. They touch! They touch! And here comes Kyle! Hamlin steps down the racetrack and Kyle Busch wins in California.
I thought they'd be nice to each other. They weren't.
Logano would take out both himself and Denny Hamlin. He would finish the race in 3rd with a junk race car. Logano would get his revenge, but at a heavy cost. He would lose the race, his car, and injure Denny Hamlin in the incident. At this point, many drivers would feel like their day couldn't get any worse.
And boy, Tony Stewart is after Logano.
Well, I did see some punches thrown today. You can't say they're just pushing each other.
As far as penalties went, Joey Logano didn't really receive any. In fact, the fans didn't truly despise him as a driver until the 2015 season. What really got affected by the incident was Logano's image with his fellow drivers. He was no longer looked at as a young superstar of the sport. Instead, he was known for the longest time as a little rich kid who never worked a day in his life.
I'm gonna bust his ass.
Number 3, Jeff Gordon's revenge against Clint Bowyer in 2012. Now this one caught a lot of people by surprise, as it came from a legend in the sport. Jeff Gordon was near the end of his career as he raced in the Cup Series for almost 20 years at this point. During the season, Gordon had one of the most unluckiest seasons, as it felt like anything he did, an unfortunate event would follow. One of the most unfortunate events of the 2012 season was the spring race at Martinsville, where Jeff Gordon was looking to score the 200th victory for Hendrick Motorsports. The only problem is a caution comes with a few laps left to go, thanks to David Rudiman staying on the track with a car that looked like it crapped itself 5 laps before. Everyone would go down pit road except for the 2 leaders, leading to a wild finish that would leave Jeff Gordon without a victory. The one who made contact with Gordon was the number 15 machine of Clint Bowyer, a good friend of Jeff Gordon. The event had a sour ending for both drivers, but all in all, it seemed like the 4-time champ forgave Clint Bowyer. Later that season, both Bowyer and Gordon were in the hunt for the championship as they entered Martinsville in the fall. Both drivers would make contact again, a situation that Jeff Gordon was not happy about at all. It seemed like any patience that Gordon had on the racetrack was starting to wear thin. All it would take at this point would be a repeat offender making contact with him once again. In the second to final race, Clint Bowyer would make contact yet again with the 24 car. This would cause a flat tire on the 24 machine, ruining yet another good race for the unlucky team. Now, most incidents, a driver would go down pit road, change their tire, and go back out on the racetrack. However, Jeff Gordon has a different idea all entirely.
He's turning Clint Bowyer into the wall.
I was a real act of a champion. The most cowardly non-championship shit I have ever seen in my life. What a coward.
Jeff Gordon would wreck Clint Bowyer, inevitably ending his opportunity to run for the championship in the 2012 season. Jeff Gordon would take his junked race car into the garage area. Within seconds, Clint Bowyer's team is immediately there to confront Jeff Gordon. A skirmish breaks out and Jeff Gordon is hauled away into his hauler. However, that is not going to stop Clint Bowyer, who runs all the way from his torn race car to Jeff Gordon's hauler. Even though he recorded the fastest lap time on foot around the racetrack, he would not be able to confront the 4-time champion. NASCAR, however, would step in and fine Jeff Gordon $100,000 and also dock him 25 points in the standings, a penalty that definitely did not fit the crime. In the end, both drivers were able to move past the incident and become friends once again. Unfortunately for both of them, neither of them were able to score a championship after this incident. Number 2, Matt Kenseth's revenge against Joey Logano in 2015. 2015 was a season for Joey Logano. It seemed like no matter where NASCAR was at, he was a contender for the victory. He won plenty of races throughout the year and started the round of 12 with a victory, securing him into the semifinals. Matt Kenseth, another driver having a good season, was also looking to punch his ticket into the round of 8. Unfortunately for him, he is in a spot where the only way for him to advance is with a victory. In the final laps at Kansas, Matt Kenseth is looking to secure another win in the season. All he has to do is hold off a fast-charging Joey Logano, who is already locked in, but for some reason, Logano is looking to grab another victory by all means necessary.
And around goes the 20, sideways in front of the 22. Kenseth slides, caution comes out.
Kenseth had his only chance of victory snagged away from Joey Logano, an incident that baffled many due to the circumstances. Kenseth and the fans are upset by the incident, but instead of Logano getting punished by the spin, he would actually get praised by the CEO of NASCAR, adding to the already troubling situation. Logano would continue to play mind games at Talladega and would get another victory, sweeping the round of 12 in the process. This would get on the nerves of many, but no one more than Matt Kenseth. At this point, Matt Kenseth is almost ready to snap on the championship contender. All he needs now is to get his payback, and what better place to do it than a half-mile racetrack? It's the fall race at Martinsville, and fans are excited to see who will be the first one to lock themselves into the championship 4. A big wreck happens near the end that takes out a few drivers, including Matt Kenseth. Kenseth's car was basically done at this point. However, the team was determined to stay in the race. Many people were wondering why Kenseth would want to come back on the racetrack. Well, we would soon know.
And Kenseth cleared by Logano. Maybe no! Kenseth takes him out! Logano into the wall! Caution comes out and the crowd roars!
The wreck would destroy Kenseth and Logano's car, thus ending Logano's chances of winning the race. The act of revenge was so blatant that everyone knew why the two connected. NASCAR was not impressed by the Kenseth move at all, and gave him a 2-race suspension. A suspension that many had mixed feelings about, but didn't help Joey Logano's situation. Joey Logano would wind up missing the championship 4, and Kenseth would return back to the season finale with a few extra fans. And number 1, Kyle Busch's revenge against Ron Hornaday in 2011. Between all the revenge moments in NASCAR, this one was by far the worst. In the 2011 truck race, Ron Hornaday was looking to stay in the hunt for the championship. His best years are behind him, and he is hoping to close out his career on top. He is in a fierce battle between Austin Dillon, Johnny Sauter, and James Buescher. Going into the second and last race in the 2011 Truck Series season, he only sits 15 points behind the points leader. All he needs to do is have a solid day here at Texas, and he will be in striking distance for the championship. A driver also entered into this race is a driver we've mentioned before in this video, Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch is having a stellar year as he's been able to collect multiple victories in all of NASCAR's top 3 divisions. However, as we mentioned earlier, his anger is starting to get the best of him more often than not. He has been involved in a few incidents throughout the season, but nothing too extreme at this point. But after a few brutal finishes in the NASCAR Cup Series, many were afraid that his tipping point was just around the corner. In the first few laps, Hornaday and Busch are racing hard for the second position when the 33 truck gets loose in the corner exit of turn 2, causing him to make contact with Kyle Busch and the outside wall. While damage is seen on both trucks, both can be repaired in a matter of one pit stop. However, Kyle Busch is not thinking of repairing his truck. Instead, he's looking to cause one of the most controversial moments in NASCAR history.
Trying to get by, looked like the 17 of Timothy Peters. They slid up the racetrack, and now Kyle Busch not happy at all.
It's all good, dude.
And Kyle Busch is going to turn the 33 to the wall. Our championship contender Hornaday in the wall.
Well, Kyle Busch should be parked for this race and maybe the rest of the season for that. Holy cow, I can't believe he did
Championship
that.
contender Ron Hornaday hard into the wall. Kyle Busch sends him in.
You all right?
Well, we saw him playing games like that at Martinsville, but we're running over 180 miles an hour.
Window net down on the 33 of Hornaday.
Go to the garage.
The two trucks were trying to get by.
The wreck would end both drivers' race, and unfortunately, Ron Hornaday's chances of going after his 5th Truck Series championship were over. Everyone in the sport is in disbelief on what they saw on the racetrack. Many were wondering if Busch would apologize for the incident, but instead, he would mostly blame Ron Hornaday for the incident and took hardly any responsibility. NASCAR would come down hard on the future 2-time champ and suspend him from competition for the whole weekend, a move that hadn't been done since the 2002 season. It would inevitably ruin both drivers' run for the championship, and to this day has been a contributing factor to Kyle Busch being the forever driver to be constantly booed at every single race he participates in.